Welcome. If it's Friday, it's the CEO series. Our guest today is Ben Whitter, author of Human Experience at Work, as well as author of An Employee Experience. He's the CEO of the HEX Organization and founder of the World Employee Experience Institute. Let's talk a little about him. He shares his work and research through popular networks, advisory services, coaching, and a global HEX practitioner program. His work has reached over 18 million people, inspired by the first EX conference, and he has been featured in publications including The Times, The Telegraph, Forbes, Financial Times, Economist, MIT, Sloan, Thomson Reuters, and more. Wow, that's an expansive background. Ben, thank you so much for being a guest. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's great to be here, and thanks for the invite.
Well, you know what? The reason we're connected is because I saw an article that you wrote, and it was concerning your new book. So I want to start off talking about the new book. So why did you decide to write this book? And you had just recently, not recently, but a while back had put out another book. So what was the impetus to say, let me dig a little deeper to get that set up?
Yeah, so the first book, which one of our mutual friends endorsed and had many discussions with about Dave Ulrich, was Employee Experience. And I literally went around the world doing what turned into a world tour, talking about employee experience, learning about employee experience. They, as authors, you usually have a book, then you do the world tour. I did it the other way around.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny.
That's okay.
But one of the things that was challenging for corporations was what is employee experience? What is this new concept? What is this new trend? And how can we make the most of it within our company? Some would start from very different positions with employee experience. So the conclusion that I drew from looking at all these great companies was that it's about humanity. It's about human centricity and the level of human centricity you can bring to your organizations. Yeah. So that was a natural kind of sequel in the making, really, and a continuation of the research to look at, okay, what does a really great organization look like in terms of serving the human experience? Because work and life now have converged in such a meaningful way that we can't just simply continue to think of the organization as this 9-to-5 vehicle that kind of like entraps people until retirement and until they get fed up of a toxic work culture. It's just it's not good enough anymore, I don't think.
So what is the difference between employee engagement and employee experience? Is it timeline based, or what's the difference between the two?
Well, for me, so I've been a practitioner for a lot of my career, and where employee engagement started from is that it's very organization-centric approach. You have employee engagement, you want to measure employee engagement, you want to do surveys, and then you want to do some actions. But if you talk to employees about employee engagement, they never go home from work and say, "Oh, darling, how was your employee engagement today? Was it wonderful? Were you highly engaged at work today? Or what's the reason for that?" They don't do that. So it's not really human. So employee engagement really is an outcome of experience. So that brings the experience of work into much sharper focus, as opposed to one of the outcomes. We look at the journey and the moments and the interactions that we can really cultivate, design, and shape and engineer to create something very, very powerful within our brands. And that tends to transcend our brands, and it kind of extends it well into society as well in terms of brand leadership, brand reputation.
Okay. So if we look at it that way, would that be from the first time I said send my CV based on a job posting? Would that experience start there, or would it start from onboarding the first day and it goes to whenever and ever I leave there?
Yeah, around that point. But I go back even before that and say, the moment you hear about a company, the employee experience begins. Okay. Because they're creating an impression in your mind of what kind of company they are. Are they a family-based company? Are they a team-based company? Are they a growing, thriving, hustling company. So he's already starting to create that impression of, I can see myself working here in this culture because it suits who I am. So it starts really when you first meet a brand, I suppose.
Okay. So I hear about it. So it's kind of like if I think of a BMW or Mercedes versus thinking of Ford or something like that. I've already have this impression kind of in my mind. So how would I check that experience? So I hear this about an organization, and how would I get some employee experience knowledge? What would be the process for trying to figure that out for someone that's external, that's trying to become internal?
Yeah, this is part of what we do in some of our certifications for companies, in that we assess the external environment around the company, what people are saying about the company and brand, what employees are saying, what former employees are saying, what people in the locality around the headquarters or the base or some of the geographical locations, what are they saying about the company? Because what I realized, so I went to something like 30 countries, and I'd always ask the audiences or the conferences, name 2 or 3 brands that immediately come to mind when I speak about employee experience. So in Australia, for example, it was Atlassian and Bunnings Warehouse, which was, they do sausage sizzle on a Thursday, which is quite popular. But all these brands immediately come to the surface around they're a positive influence in the town. They employ a lot of the people, and they've got a great reputation of the way they treat workers. Whereas in other countries, it's different brands. But that's good. I mean, we know these local brands, we know these global brands, but they all shape these stories and narratives that we tell each other. And that's a wonderful thing as well. So I start looking at all of that and creating a picture of what it is this brand represents in the world.
Okay. So, Glassdoor is being talked about. Glassdoor is being discounted. Glassdoor is being hailed. Would that be a starting point to trying to get a sense of it, or is it kind of contrived? As the CEO told me, he said, that's just BS. He said, that's just disgruntled employees. I said, but you've got 200 negative reviews on there.
Yeah. It's part of it. I look at one of the models I put forward in my book was return on experience, and certainly employee review sites like Indeed and Glassdoor and others, they're very good metrics to look at because they're directly coming from employees. Some of them can be gamed quite effectively and quite easily. You run campaigns, you get people to say positive and nice things about you, and you reward them. You gamify the process somewhat. But there's a lot of still authentic reviews there, especially the negative ones. I looked at one yesterday for a company that's really hit the headlines. And it said, this place is a soulless, lying, fake company. And that was from April 2021. And you're like, okay, this company, whatever company it is, it's got problems.
Huge problem.
It's the level of emotion in those comments that I try to look at, because if they're stinging and resentful and there's contempt in there, that says there's something not right with that brand. Even though they're maybe espousing in their marketing that they're a great place to work and they're winning these awards and run these top lists. If you're getting such strong emotional quotes like that, I'd be going to the CEO and saying, look, we need to nip this in the bud right now.
Yeah. So there's 2 things I want to cover. You mentioned return on experience, so I'll come back to that. But since you mentioned going to the CEO, in my former life, I was a CEO for Great Place to Work. And I would notice
I thought you were smiling through that last bit I said.
Yeah, because I had that conversation with these CEOs, and I'm saying, you've got huge issues here. And they would discount it. And say, well, what can we do? And HR would chime in and say, well, we could offer free coffee. We could do this. I'm like, you're missing the point.
There's some great. It's a great benchmarking exercise. Don't get me wrong, and there's lots of great things you can achieve through going through one of those processes. But I think sometimes practitioners will look for the easy way out. They'll look for the easy, low-hanging fruit, as opposed to really having those challenging conversations with the CEO and saying, look, it's just not good enough and we need to do something. And that could be the bigger issue about a structure. It could be the way the organization is designed. It could be the actual mission and values of the business are just so, there's so much distance between them and the employees. That's the thing you need to solve, as opposed to free coffee and yoga every other weekend.
Yeah, right. It makes no sense. And putting a Band-Aid on a major cut, So Yeah. So you mentioned return on experience. I really like that because I had a conversation with one of my clients out of Singapore last week, and we had a discussion on ROI for leadership development, ROI for training and development. Give me a little more insight on return on experience, because I really, really, really like that.
Yeah, so in our programs, I coach employee experience leaders and people that want to move into this space. And we talk about return on experience because if you're thinking about employee experience as a holistic thing, so it's organization, enterprise level, system wide, then you need to look for evidence of impact across all the different domains where people have experiences. So this takes us away from the traditional HR model, which is, absence, turnover, engagement, blah, blah, blah. Which, as a CEO, I'm not really interested in too much in terms of that data. Maybe regrettable attrition is something that I'm keen on. Maybe if employees' well-being is suffering or actually really going quite well, then I'd be looking at that. But there are some that actually just don't quite count for anything, and they don't matter to business leaders. So it tends to be, how do we get employee experience work connected to the business as quickly as possible? And as practitioners, we need to look for sources of evidence and information and intelligence across the entire organization. Customer experience results, reputation management results, brand standing results, and profit and loss. All of those great things we should be claiming and looking at within our employee experience work.
Okay, employee experience, business case. Here's why we need to do that. Is that a statistical kind of approach, looking at relationships between, say, our engagement surveys and productivity or whatever it is? Is there some kind of numbers behind that?
Oh yeah, I'd be, so if I was running internally an employee experience team, I'd have some statisticians and some people analytics people in there straight away, just to make that business case and that kind of growing mandate of impact just keep on being sustainable and maintained. So as you start, usually you start the employee experience work in a safe zone. So it's something you can control, and you can maybe redesign an onboarding experience or start to develop leaders or something like that. But ultimately, the employee experience is an organization-wide approach. So you need to get leaders to come into this as quickly as possible, to sponsor it and make sure they're investing in it, as opposed to, okay, this is just a HR thing or something from corporate. Everyone needs to be a part of it and co-creating. When that doesn't happen, you're in the headlines, front page of the BBC, front page of the Guardian for the wrong reasons. There's a lot of brands in the UK I found out this week.
Yeah. You're right about that. But so that would come back to another issue. So within the HR space is that, what are you tracking? I was the former vice president of human resources for Martha Stewart. So what we would do was that onboarding, how did we do? First week, how did we do? 3 months out, how did we do? But not only how did we do, but what could we do differently for the next time around? So we kept asking those questions at every milestone. So we had data behind it. And we can look to see we're not trending the right way or things we can do. So in order in order for this to be successful, we have to measure. We have to measure, right?
Yeah, real-time, continuous, everyday experiences, monitored, measured, and most importantly, as you say, taking action on that data is one of the biggest things organizations can do. But a redesigned experience, the difference between a poor onboarding experience and a world-class experience, it makes such a profound difference on productivity, profitability, innovation, because people can get settled and get thinking and get creating as quickly as possible. So it's relatively straightforward to chart that path and measure it, and then express the return on value or the return on experience.
I've always said that first day when that person arrives, that engagement is through the roof, and you have to make sure you maintain that. In this experience we're going to go through for 1 week onboarding or whatever it is.
And it's the big thing about connecting what you say on the outside to what you deliver as reality on the inside. So if you're saying, okay, we're a great purpose-led company, if that's beautiful external marketing, if that doesn't come into the employee experience, then you're going to get found out very, very quickly. And it's going to be massively detrimental to your brand. because even some of the world's greatest workplaces right now, they're having to fend off unionization campaigns by employees because of the way they're treating their workforces. So this is not easy work, and the best struggle with this. So organizations, if they lose sight of this co-creation, they're going to lose sight of ultimate business success, I think, in the future.
So CX has been around a while in marketing. I would assume it's been around a while because there's always a lot of articles as it relates to CX, customer experience. Could that same model work for us inside of an organization? Should we kind of pair our methodology with from the marketing customer experience side?
Yeah, again, there's so many different skills, strategies, techniques, and approaches that can come across from customer experience. And I think you get a lot of organizations, they start to become quite mature with the CX and EX work. And then it kind of meets in the middle and says, okay, we're now a very experiential organization, and we're looking and drawing on resources, knowledge, and skills from each section of the business. And when that cross-fertilization happens, it tends to be a really powerful example, and your brand promise becomes lived on the inside as well, which is great. So I would say absolutely. The big thing I'm very anti is treating employees as customers. I don't agree with that.
Okay.
It doesn't make a lot of sense in many respects, because we have such a deeply committed relationship with employees. Customers can leave tomorrow, employees really can't. And it's a much more emotional relationship. So I would treat employees as human beings as I would customers.
Okay. Because there's a lot of alignment to that, treat them as if they were customers. And even Richard Branson says kind of the same thing. A friend of mine, the CEO here, he says, take care of your people who take care of the people.
Yeah, exactly. That's good. That's great rhetoric. But viewing your employees as customers, I think it does them a disservice because of the level of loyalty and the level of emotional attachment they have to your business. And I've got to be honest, if I was in an organization, someone started treating me like a customer, I wouldn't take to it very well. I'm there. I'm working hard every day. I'm doing 12-hour shifts for you, and you want to treat me like maybe a transactional customer? No, forget about it. I want to treat you like a human being and part of this team.
Yeah. Give me a little more than that customer, because that's sort of kind of transactional kind of thing, And I need a little more. So here's a situation that I ran into this past week. I was talking with a founder of a new business here in Dubai, and they're moving along, second round of financing, and he started talking about the experience. And we've got the basics in, but we've got to connect to people, got to connect to try and begin building the employee experience. I went to their website. It was all about business, nothing about people. What would you advise someone that we're seeking to, okay, we've got the business model. Now we've got to work on the experience inside of the organization, what it means to work here, what kind of advice would you give an aspiring CEO, in building a model?
Yeah. I think for this is a question I get a lot in terms of where do you start with employee experience? And for me, it really starts with, okay, so they're business, but what is the business they're in, and what are they saying to the market? What is their ethos? What are their values? What are the promises they're stating publicly? And I would look to draw all of that into the employee experience. So whatever you're espousing on the outside aligns to the inside. So when you're building your strategy, you're thinking about how are we bringing together all these promises and immersing our people in them every single day. So if you're saying you're a digital first company, if you're saying you're environmentally friendly, if you're saying your purpose is bigger than profit, then great. But how does that reflect well in the employee experience and the way that you work and treat your workforce? I think this is a big step that a lot of organizations miss. And there's often this, this golden goose marketing, which is wonderful. And then you start your first day and it's like, oh my word, it's nothing like that. And then people quickly leave, or they do 2 years and then they go on to something better.
I like the golden goose marketing. Woo.
It is funny, you look at the psychological contract one of the biggest issues in business, I think, is broken promises
Mm-hmm.
and unmet expectations. And that's the same with employee experience. If you're saying one thing and then delivering another. So if it looks like a sophisticated technology-driven business and everything's really for the right reasons and we're doing the right thing by people and planet, and then on the inside, employees start to observe practices that go completely against what you're saying on the outside.
That. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's when things start to unravel quite quickly.
So as in your business, as you travel the globe and you're talking with senior level human resources people, and to kind of get them acquainted with the so-called employee experience piece, do you find that the capabilities are there, or they may find it as a tough sell inside of the organization? What is some feedback you're getting as you talk through this? And we understand the importance of it, but how do I go to his office, her office, and begin having this conversation?
The reality is a lot of people would struggle with it if it wasn't coming from maybe a senior leader. It's like if you have a senior sponsor or CEO and they say, okay, we're going to really become the best employer in the world. Okay. Similar to what Bezos has said. Amazon have sometimes struggled to get their employee experience work off the ground because it hasn't come from the CEO or the founder or the executive chairman or whoever it may be. Yeah. Now Bezos has said that and stated that publicly. That will filter now through the business and everything becomes a lot easier because it's a stated company objective. I think that's the first priority. I would be convincing, persuading, cajoling, challenging.
Whatever needed.
I'd be doing whatever's necessary to get the senior leaders into the right space to deal with employee experience and to understand the consequences of getting this wrong. And the consequences can be really quite severe and embarrassing and sometimes humiliating if your culture is the reason you're not growing your business, you're not moving to IPO, you're not bringing in more fans and ambassadors. That's quite embarrassing, and it always comes back to senior leadership team. So I would say, okay, forget about the employee journey workshops, forget about all that. Let's focus on strategically influencing the most important and influential stakeholders in the business, and that is going to be the senior management team and actually employees as well, because that's where we start with this work. That's the very first step.
Yeah. Okay. First step. So having that conversation with those sponsors. One of the things that I've realized in talking with the senior level HR people as well as CHROs is that if they have to quantify that from, say, an end of month business meeting, and you're walking through the employee experience kind of concept, relating it to productivity or revenue, a net profit per employee, all those kind of metrics. Are there any case studies out there so you can kind of give us a highlight as to how someone made the employee experience and they connected it to live numbers?
Yeah, so it's a combination of what we've seen in employee experience. There's a lot more marketing and a lot more capabilities around reputation management within the business internally. So they're starting to connect the employee experience with business results in a quantifiable way where they can, because sometimes it's quite tricky to do that. But they're also combining storytelling as well. So it's a combination of hard data. Okay, this is what we've improved through this experience. Imagine what we could do in other parts of the business if we continue this approach. But then actually it's the human stories behind it as well. So telling the stories of frontline workers, we've changed their experiences. We've lifted them out of whatever mental health issues they've had. We have a self-reported higher well-being levels now. We have people who are more productive and loyal to the company in ways that they weren't before. So all of that it creates and generates so many unbelievable stories. And when we're working with CEOs, it's often those stories that break through. Unless they're going through some kind of crisis or some kind of catalyst for change, it's going to be those kind of stories mixed with data that's going to create that compelling narrative to say, okay, let's invest in this. And also our competitors are doing it, so why not? Competitors are doing it.
Well, we laugh and we say the competitors are doing, but the competitors are doing it, and competitors could be drawing away your talent there And maybe
Absolutely.
you're having a tough time to try and hire people because the branding piece is all external branding piece doesn't look good.
Yeah, that's the great thing around that external branding piece. I worked with a company a while ago, and they had a fabulous employee experience, but the problem is it wasn't communicated out well. It wasn't shared in a transparent way, so employees really didn't connect everything together. So they were losing a lot of talent to their competitor. But when they arrived at their competitor, because we tracked them and then we followed up with interviews because we wanted to see how what was happening here. They got to the competitor. They said, "Yeah, can we come back?"
Yeah.
It wasn't as bad as we thought there.
Yeah.
So, but the one thing the competitor was doing, they were telling the story in a more coherent and powerful way.
Yeah.
They didn't have a high quality employee experience at all.
So you brought up something else. Every time you respond, you bring up all these nuggets to dig a little deeper. When you just mentioned the telling the story, and so I'm going to take it to a situation. You're inside the boardroom or C-suite, and you're walking through numbers.
Yeah.
So you're saying, tell a story behind it, an actual story behind it, and that would resonate more so than bullet point, sub-bullet point, and pointing out those so-called facts.
Oh, yeah. I mean, turn that meeting, that corporate board meeting or whatever it is, into an actual experience. I'd be getting employees in there to share their own stories, to make it emotional and logical at the same time, because you're going to need to get the CFO on board. And they like numbers and logic and rationality.
Yeah. And they control all this.
Yeah, exactly. So we want to get them a little bit looser around, the humanity in the business. And, some wonderful CFOs who are human-centered. But it's going to be a combination of all those things to persuade and also challenge. I remember going into a board meeting, and the first slide was a direct quote from an employee from the survey, and it wasn't a good one.
Oh,
and I just looked around the room and I said, "Is that good enough?" Because that's the culture that's been created here, and it started in this room.
Yeah.
And then you go through the data to say this is not an isolated case. Now you start to link it to attrition, to all the usual metrics.
See, this is what I always kind of premise anytime I've got to do a presentation. What is going to be the hook? I can have the greatest topic in the world, but if I don't start off with a hook, that first slide says here, and they look at this right away, everybody's interest is piqued, and I can just begin draw you in by linking that together and tying a story, around that.
Yeah, and it demands a level of boldness, perhaps, that, and I think sometimes HR has been guilty of being very cautious and
Tell me about it.
very cautious, very reactive to management as opposed to challenging management. I think that's a big difference. There's a difference between, okay, yes, managers, I'll go and do this, managers, we'll get a report for you, managers, we'll implement this for you. There's something to said, get on the front foot and take it to them, work with them, co-create with them, and turn them into maybe sometimes an indifferent audience and make them your biggest champions. That's a big achievement in itself. Yeah.
Well, that's transitioning from the administrative piece, taking orders, to a more advisory role. And they are listening to you because you're the people expert, you're the employee experience expert, engagement expert. So what you say, it's kind of the same way when the CFO speaks, everybody listens because it's assumed that this person has a thorough understanding of all the numbers and what they say is fact.
Mm. When half the time they're faking it like the rest of us.
Well, they are, but they have at least they give them benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, that's true.
Versus the HR person who's kind of maybe hesitant in saying this, and as soon as they possibly get challenged, they kind of fall to pieces and go back into where they came from. That's what I meant in relating that.
Yeah, so and that's often the problem with corporate management teams, and that HR is quite low down the pecking order, and they've really had to fight to get there in the first place. But as we've seen from many progressive businesses, if you have that people person in that in a serious role at board membership level, it's a catalyst for great things.
Yeah. So that brought, I keep smiling because you keep hitting these bullseyes. You mentioned earlier about sponsors. So I always, when I coach people, I said, look around your organization, that C-suite, who's people-centric? Who do they eat with? Who do they hang out on the weekends, play golf with, or whatever they do? I said, because that could be your insight into getting to everybody else in the room. If that person is respected, but that person has kind of a people-centric mentality. And that could come back to sponsors. Can you give us a little insight on that? Because you just touched on that alignment.
So I'll give you an example from China, actually. So one of the case studies in my new book is Fortile, a multi-billion-dollar company, white goods provider, producer in China, one of the biggest in Asia. And they refuse to have a HR function. So they have a people and culture team, which in Chinese means the humanity team, which I quite like.
Okay.
And they don't really have that chief people officer. They have the CEO who takes personal accountability for the quality of the employee experience. And I'm like, they have senior level roles to deal with all the things that chief people officer would normally deal with. But he said it's that important for us to get this right every single day. I'm going to be the one that's accountable at board for it.
Okay.
No one else. So it's that kind of, if you're raising your level of human centricity, it does question the way you build your organization. I mean, some are even, there's many case studies in my new book that says, actually, do we even need a HR function now?
Yeah.
Because when you're dealing with a human experience, you can't afford to treat people like resources anymore. And it's inauthentic in terms of your message to the brand. So HR is under some greater scrutiny from these progressive CEOs. And one of the cases I work with is Ford in the US, 200,000 employees. And they've just changed their CHRO into a chief people and employee experience officer.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which is it's a huge signal of intent to the market and to organizations worldwide. The trick now is to filter that right through the structure and to ensure that we're getting we're unleashing the full potential of people professionals.
Okay. You know what? I've often said the same thing, human resource department, people department, those kind of things. So that's just a changing. And I said, yeah, but it sends a signal and you just got to step up to the plate to make sure that you achieve that. So this the industrial revolution, human resources, personnel to HR, that needs to kind of go away. It's kind of like the HRBP model was designed in a way to be that strategic consulting expert inside of a function or an organization. And they just gave it out to people. And people are HRBPs or whatever it was. And all they were in the end, as far as they were perceived inside of the organizations, the stories I hear, they were just a glorified HR assistant. Because they didn't have the capabilities. So the signage or logo, you know what I mean? But this branding piece, we have to be able to deliver on that. So that's pretty cool because Ford is the industrial revolution. And now it's such a transition in the auto industry. Yeah, cool.
Yeah. And that was a great case that I worked with them for the last year on that one. And just the way they dealt with workers coming back into their manufacturing plants was absolutely incredible. The level of compassion, the level of consideration in the design of that experience. Okay. And you can see it can be a catalyst for that brand to now go on and do some amazing things with employee experience as they start to kind of move more into the field. So the potential here now is, like you say, it's for HR to go away. And even the HR business partner model, which I mentioned and criticized in my book, simply because I've lived it and experienced it. So I have some credibility in that field. I'm like, it disassociated really talented HR professionals from the HR organization generally. It's like, I'm a HR business partner now. I'm part of the business.
Yeah, here we go. I'm ready to take it on.
Yeah, exactly. No sense at all.
So I got into a conversation online with someone the other day. They were saying HR protect the company. It's not about the employees. We have to make sure all the policies, and then and I'm reading the feed. And at the end of it, I said, can't take it anymore. I said, I read this and I'm thinking, you guys really need to get out of the bubble you're in. I said, because the profession you're in, if you keep staying in this lane, You're going to look up one day and the profession is gone and you're going to be laid off. You look at GE healthcare in China. They digitized 85% of their processes. So what do? They took their HR business partners or whatever, generals or whatever, and they gave them kind of a re-immersion into the strategic aspect of solutioning, problem solving within the function, as opposed to sitting there when someone comes over to you and says, can you take care of this or make sure we do this or do that? So so what I'm asking you is that, so skill set for the practitioners of, our background, how are we going to move that to be able to deliver on what you're talking about?
Well, we built this global HEX practitioner program 2019, before any of this COVID kicked off. And what we focus on is really, holistic thinking, being experience driven in all that we do as a part of the business, a deep level of human centricity, whatever that looks like, using design thinking and other tools and techniques. But it's really to rise up above it and say, okay, are we really delivering our truth? So our purpose, our mission, our values in practice, and what experiences are going to help us bring that to life, and what experiences are holding us back and getting in the way of business progress. So that's some of the areas that we focus on. But in terms of capabilities, HR, for some reason, they continue to build on this old paradigm of HR. So you're seeing a lot of focus on traditional skills, which are not going to be relevant in the next few years. And that's a great danger for the HR professional of today, because I don't know why they're spending money on HR capability programs, which take them back to the future. It's like, okay, we're not suddenly going to go back. We're always going to be going forward. And the future, if you look at all the trends, it's going to be an experience economy. We're going to need to make more happen with less resources. We're going to need to be really focused on human centricity and managing societal expectations of our brands as well. Lots of brands running into trouble with how they position themselves on societal causes and social justice issues. So all of this complicated stuff that's coming down, we absolutely need empathy, creativity, co-creation, human centricity. And that's what we should be developing, not some of these HR capabilities, which continue to build on this paradigm, which I don't think is going to be fit for the future.
Okay. So if for the CHROs that are listening, and I know we have quite a few listeners.
You're probably throwing things at the screen by this point.
No, this is educational, because this needs to be said. Every opportunity I get, I say this. I say, you're no different than the factory worker that they're going to put robots in. Exactly. What skills are you going to have in 5 to 10 years in doing that? What advice would you give the chief people officer and experienced people? We'll give them a big title. If you had to have that conversation, what advice would you give them?
I think for me, it's about going all out, full commitment into the human element of the business. That's where the expertise needs to grow. That's where we need to lead from, as opposed to sitting back in our corporate ivory offices, consulting and writing policies and doing all this stuff. You need to look across your HR organization and portfolio and say, are we being as human-centered as we possibly can? And if you can answer yes to that, then that's great. But if you're not, then it's time to reskill and rethink about your role.
Well, the internal brand, in a lot of cases, that people see that department is, you don't want to go there.
It's a dead end sometimes.
You don't want to go there. So here's what I saw online. I tend to monitor these things, and I get so upset. I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? So someone posted the other day that there was an employee that one of his family member died, and they needed to take off for bereavement or whatever it was, and she was trying to figure out whether she should ask for a death certificate. And I'm thinking, really? She said, because the policy said that they should provide a death certificate. So my point was, if you were in that case and they came to you and said, oh, we're so sorry to hear about your loss, but we want to need a copy of the death certificate. I said, how would you feel? And you make the decision based on that. And that comes back to design thinking, which the first step is to put yourself in someone else's shoes.
Yeah. A great example. I think I read that one as well, and I was probably the same as you. I was spitting my coffee out over the computer at that one. But it's an absolute disgrace, and the only death certificate that lady should be asking for is the one for the company, because it's not going to be around if it continues doing that to its employees. It's a disgrace.
See, I wish I was that smart that could have thought of that right off the tip of my tongue like that, because I would love to have posted that, as a response. So we got the CHRO, we got them to understand what needs to happen because things are changing. So the CEO, the C-suite, that may be reluctant, numbers, revenue, net, gross margins, human-centric. How do you have the discussion with that level of leader, sponsor, whatever you want to call them?
I mean, the first thing is education, really, because sometimes they're doing a great job. Let's not beat around the bush about that. They're dealing with complicated environments. People are always complicated at the best of times. So it's not to criticize them and say, look, you're really dropping the ball on this. Sometimes they do. But in this case, it's more a supportive hand to say, look, we could grow so much more effectively if the people are with us every step of the way. Mm-hmm. Now it's easy to say, it's harder to do. So you have to invest in this idea that we're going to be a great place to work. We deliver great experiences, but work is going to become something more profound. Work is now about life and work, and mm-hmm. We need to support our workforce beyond 9 to 5. Every moment that they go through, they're going to be looking for a signal from us to say we've got the back and we're supporting them. The mm-hmm. employees that do that, they're the ones that people will literally run through walls for. They would do anything for them. And that's what we want for our companies. Because we want customers to do that. They want customers to be that emotionally attached to us. They keep on coming back time and time again. And it's the same for employees. It's just we want them coming back time and time again with that renewed energy, that renewed belief, and that renewed sense of this is a great place to work and I'm part of something amazing. Now, if you can get that right as a CEO, you're going to lead your brand to admired, trusted, and respected status. And no one can take that away from you. You may have a few mistakes along the way, but generally people will forgive, some mistakes, but they won't forgive you for a very poor, toxic workplace culture.
Yeah.
Tends to be a little bit unforgivable sometimes.
So let's pitch your book, Human Experience at Work. Give us some highlights, and why did you decide to update that from the earlier book on the employee experience? So you took it a step further.
Yeah, it's kind of the book I wanted to write first time round, because I was looking at employee experience, and there's some strong trends and things coming out of that work, which said, look, HR has a real opportunity now to take on board this employee experience and really become this business leader for their organizations. Mm-hmm. Now, all the evidence since that is saying HR might not be taking that opportunity. There's great intention, but the execution is still lacking. And there's quite a big gap between intent and execution. Mm-hmm. So that moves into human experience, and it's definitely more radical. There's some controversial ideas in there about, the future of HR, how you set up your support functions. But it was the truth I needed to share based on the information and evidence and research from companies that I've seen around the world. We need to challenge this paradigm of humans as resources, and we need to focus more on human experiences. Now, that literally changes the nature of business progress, in my view, because I look at companies like IKEA, Ford, Fortal, all these big brands. GSK was another fantastic case study. And I look at the way they work with their workforces. And business progress is, it's about planet, it's about people, it's about performance, and there's great synchronicity between those three things.
I'm laughing again because you're hitting on the bullseye.
I'm on fire today.
Yeah, you're on fire, man. You're hitting it. I watch when I'm working. I have CNBC on kind of in the background because I've always felt that. In all my years of HR, I wanted to be perceived as a business person first, but my expertise just happens to sit in human resources, people, or whatever it is. And one of the things that will always cause me to look up is when I hear a CEO says, people are our greatest assets. I'm like, oh God, no, please stop using that.
Here's to the eye.
Yeah. So the reporter never follows up with that. And I've always said, I would love to be in that case. I said, okay, could you give us 3 examples? Give us 3 examples how your company exhibits that each and every day. And this is my personal opinion. If you were to follow up with that, they would stumble because they may not be able to give a coherent connectivity to people are our greatest assets.
Yeah, we are kindred spirits because I feel exactly the same about that. The amount of times you see it, and for me, every single time it's a big red flag that something's not quite right. If you're still using that kind of financial terminology to refer to your employees, you're in deep trouble.
Yeah. That's a flag for me too. I mean, when I hear that, I said, oh boy. And then I'll go look at the company. I go to this site, I look at it, and then I go to Glassdoor and I said, yep, exactly what I just thought. Totally clueless, as it relates to that. So what are you working on now, and what's coming out next, or big projects? Can you give us some insights on that? Or
so our HEX practitioner program, which is for individuals to sign up to, that continues to grow around the world. We've got lots of different countries and colleagues involved. But the next one for us is the HEX Organization certification. So we're going to start to certify organizations that we feel are getting this right. So they're taking the human and employee experience seriously. And it's reflected in their business models. So we're going to assess it. And we're not saying they're perfect organizations. We're saying the intention is there, and we'll help them along the journey with the execution as well. But they've got to a standard where it's, we would stand up on a pedestal and say, this is an organization you should definitely look at. Because I think we need more of those inspiring examples around the world. From my first book, we had Airbnb and Starbucks and many different companies. And we've kind of synthesized what these companies are doing to make their employee experience work so good and so strong and so powerful in the good times and the not so good times. And we need to help people and organizations with that, really. So that's the next big thing. Working on that as we speak.
Okay, so give us your website.
So it's hexorganization.com, HEX organization with a Z.com. Or you can find me at benwhitter.com as well. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can ask me some questions there. Always like to get involved in some debates on that particular platform.
Cool. Debates. Yeah, I get a lot of those back and forth. Sometimes that's it. Sometimes sometimes I say, why do you even bother? Because you get upset.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
I'm going to use your words though. Next time I hear someone say people are our greatest asset, I'm going to go, oh boy. I'm going to use that.
Well, I like your response to that was they're in trouble. Right away, that's a signal that they're in trouble. There's no connection to that.
I'll quote you, you quote me. That's fine. That's right.
Exactly. Ben, thank you so much. Ben's the contact information is on the screen now. So if anyone wants to follow up with him, please do. He's the expert as it relates to this not so new phenomenon, but this phenomenon of tying people from a human-centric kind of perspective. So Ben, thank you so much. We'll be in touch, and just hang on as we begin to close out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Loved it.
Okay.